Hey everyone, it's Carter King. If you're an educator, a leader, or just a parent who wants to teach kids about space, check out my newest book, Carter's Journey Through Space. It's available now on Amazon, Target, and bookstores everywhere. Come explore the universe with me.
Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create environments where people thrive. Through real conversations, practical strategies, and powerful stories, we equip leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself to build cultures rooted in purpose, performance, and authenticity. Because culture isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. This is the Contagious Culture Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is to help you create ecosystems and environments where people thrive. Today's conversation is one with somebody I absolutely love all of the things that she is doing, and it's one that every leader, board member, organization, and organizational leader needs, because while a lot of people know how to talk about hiring and how to talk about vision and growth, very few know how to talk about transition, succession, departure, and what it really means to leave well. And our guest today, my friend, Miss Hattaway, founder of Leaving Well, a practice built around helping organizations and individual leaders navigate workplace transitions with intention, with purpose, and when possible, even when joy. So I'm so excited to have this conversation today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing so well. And I love hearing you read that part, especially the "and when possible joy" piece, because I think we have gotten so used to departures being really terrible that it usually throws people for a little bit of a loop when they're like, wait, we can have joy in the midst of really messy transitions. And I don't know, I'm just a firm believer that we can. So thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I just want to look, I got to start with that because that's why I wanted to end with that. So that could be the first thing that we talk about. How do we even leave or transition from organizations with this sense of joy? Because it is a very tense and contentious process that we often have. Like, what does that even look like? And is that really possible?
I think it is really possible. I think that the first thing that we have to really come to an agreement on, all of us, whether it's inside the nonprofit sector or not, the reality is that people leave. Like if I'm doing a retreat or a big group of people about this topic, the first thing I ask them is raise your hand if you're still at your first job. And I mean, like no one raises their hand, right? None of us are still at our first job, but we treat our workplace transitions as though we never had practice. Like we all have had so much practice of how it doesn't go well that it only takes a little bit of imagination to make it a little bit better. So even if it's literally just in the way that you process your last day, that can be anything from if you're an in-person team, everyone leaves a sticky note on the person's desk or monitor or cubicle about one thing that they taught them. So they walk in on their last day to a office full of sticky notes. It could be that they don't want to be celebrated on their last day. And so you instead send them a gift card to Gold Belly or something. Like there's ways that we can make that piece of it easier and a little bit more joyful. Even when you are firing people, if you have a reduction in force, it does not take that much effort to, one, make sure that they have dinner covered. That is, such a humanity focused thing to do. Is say like, and here's a gift card to Uber Eats or whatever. The other thing that I've seen a lot of teams do really beautifully is when there's a reduction in force or a large layoff, they create a spreadsheet that says, here's so-and-so's name, their contact information, what we loved about having them on the team, and here's also my reference for them in the notes section. Like that doesn't take a whole lot of effort and can just inject so much humanity and joy into the process. And then I personally believe that part of the joy comes from planning proactively. So if you think about going on a big trip with your family, you're likely going to have more joy if you do some planning on the front end than if you wait until you land and then you're like, so what should we do today, friends? Like anything that's proactive planning can bring joy. The thing though that I think that is really important, Kyle, is that when we talk about departures and leaving a workplace, what often comes up is all of the unresolved memories and things from times that you've either been left in the past or that you've done the leaving. So that goes as far back as childhood. or if you were a product of a divorce, or if you moved a lot, like all of that stuff ends up coming for people. So part of the joy piece of it is also needing to reconcile with your past reaction and relationship to change and transition. So anyway, that's
Now,
what I
this
mean.
is it's so much, and we could take this conversation in so many different ways. But before we even do that, like, who are you? For somebody who doesn't understand how amazing you are, like, how do you describe yourself, and what do you want people to remember about you when they interact with you?
Yeah, that's so many great questions. I come by the work that I do because I have navigated workplace transitions in my own life. And then I've also navigated a lot of moving in my life. So we have moved, I don't know, we've quit counting. This last move to our hopefully permanent residence for the rest of my life, I think makes move number 22.
22.
22. And in each of those moves, I've gotten really, really good at knowing who I am in the move. But part of that is because I know how to say goodbye to the place that I just left so that I'm as open as I can be to the new place. If I went to the new place and I was filled with resentment about having to leave, or I was pissed off because of all the amazing favorites of the place that I just left, I'm not going to be open to the new place. And I started realizing as I was moving a lot, and then I also served as a real estate agent for a number of years, I was like, oh, all of the things that I'm telling my clients on how to leave better, a zip code and a postal code, we need to start adopting in the nonprofit world. So the work that I do is threefold. I either serve as interim executive director or CEO when an organization has a gap from a death, a resignation, a retirement, or a termination. I also serve proactively to help organizations with their succession planning. And then I also do a lot of board development because boards really are the ones that hold the ownership of succession planning from an ED CEO perspective. I think that the other things, Kyle, that influence the work that I do is that I went through menopause early. And I know that might seem like a weird thing to say in the conversation, but it helped me at that point detach and untether from my own legacy, my own reputation. And so I'm just on such a mission to say we have to do succession planning better. I also don't mince words. So like you'll hear me say all the time, board members who are actively voting board members should never serve as an interim at a nonprofit organization. And I can say some things with my fuller chest because I am untethered from my reputation. We only have one life to live. And if we can't do it with offering really thoughtful and intentional impact, I don't know what we're doing. So that's my corner of the world, is to try and help organizations be better about the fact that people leave.
Now, I do want to go back because you said something that you went over, but I feel like there's so much power in it. You said that you experienced or you went through menopause early, and then there was a lot of realizations within that season. Can you talk about more of that intersection and what you learned and how that helped evolve the work that you're doing today as well?
Yeah, I think there was so much. So when I went through menopause, it was also overlapping a recovery from a complex tibia fibula break, which if anyone watched Lindsey Vonn, the amazing downhill skier, that's what she also suffered at this last Olympics. And so I was in stillness for a long time. At the same time, I was going through menopause. So there was a lot of things happening in my body and through my body that I didn't have control over. But what it made me realize was that we all have a choice. Like we can all look in the mirror and say, like, today's the day that I'm going to start working on something that actually has lasting impact and lasting power. And I think that, this topic of succession planning is usually reserved for wealthy families. It's often reserved for Fortune 500 companies. And I was like, why are we messing around? Why are we acting like the nonprofit scarcity and the nonprofit capacity issues don't have anything to do with succession planning? They need to. So yeah, I think it was just a beautiful timing to have it all kind of fall in my lap at the same time. This isn't a topic that we talk about on LinkedIn. We don't jump up and down and be like, I finished my succession plan, or I think I'm going to leave, or I think my board's going to fire me. So we should, like it's not a super sexy topic. And so I think the menopause piece just is really crucial because it made me start to realize, I don't know, menopause rewires the brains of women who are going through it. And I'm thankful for that rewiring because I think it helped me lead with a little bit more intention.
I have so many questions. Oh my gosh. But in the context of what we're talking about today, I'd love to know just how do you first define leaving well? Like, what does that mean? and what does it really look like in practice?
Yeah. So leaving well can look like different things if you're talking about you yourself as an individual, or if you're talking about for the organization. So leaving well for the individual means taking into account the accountability that you should have towards your role. And maybe it's not that you have accountability towards the leadership or to the board. Maybe you have accountability to the mission or the community that you're serving. So there's a component of leaving well that means that when it's time for you to go, which we all will leave, how do you want to leave your legacy behind for that place? What do you want people to be saying about you when you're gone? There's a lot of roles that we might be in that don't have power. You might figure out that if you're outreach worker or street med team or frontline staff, you might not feel like you have power, but there are small certain things that you can do in your organization. You can start telling a team member, hey, by the way, here's the documentation where I keep all of here's why I did this thing. Even if it's never done organizationally, you can do that for yourself. Even if you feel like you don't have power dynamics at play in the workplace, you can still, when you give your notice, you can say, I'm giving my notice today, and I also want you to know that I've documented some things. They're, printed off at my desk, or they're, in this file. From an organization standpoint, I think leaving well starts to take on a much different body and framework. We're talking at that point about fundraising relationships. We're talking about how do we onboard and welcome board members? How do we offboard board members? Some organizations need to start with their boards because they still have, infinite board terms or way too long board terms. And I think then it really also comes to play with first normalizing in your organization that people leave. And so when you start doing that, then you can normalize conversations about how well do we treat people when they leave. I have this big dream, Kyle, that one of these days, the Best Place to Work awards will also have a component of like, how do they transition people out? Are they still a good place to work as people are saying goodbye? Yeah. Or is it just how they do onboarding?
That is so powerful. And I think about, I transitioned from a role a little while back, and I thought it was just best practice to be able to document and build these SOPs and how you're doing what you're doing. And I built a service learning program from scratch. And I was like, here are all the contacts. Here's what I did to reach out to them. Here's all the programs and the proposals and the presentations that I did. So when I transitioned, it felt like a beautiful goodbye because I just had this binder of all 100%. Of these different things and was able to just say like, hey, whoever you bring on, here's exactly how we did what we did.
100%.
Why is that not best practice though within organizations? Like that was just, I felt like I wanted to be kind. I thought it was just best practice for me. But why is that not best practice? And what do we have to do as leaders to be able to create this type of culture within our organizations?
Yeah. Well, I think what you just said is so incredibly important. I'm loving that you did it on your own. I think that is so good. And I think the reason we don't see it a lot of times in practice, in the real world, is because we get ourselves so tied up with, but I'm busy, or I have this other work to do. I can't stop my work to get myself organized. I also think that we are in such a culture, and I'll just speak just specifically to nonprofit and social impact organizations. We are so geared towards fix the problem, everything's on fire. We don't often stop to just, do I have a couple of hours this week that I could start documenting my processes? Yes. Yeah. I also think that we don't have to borrow from the military, which I don't love borrowing really anything from the military, but they do have a beautiful concept that they use called after action, where when something is finalized, they go back through to say, where did we mess up? What could we have done better? What did we nail? What did we get right? Who did we leave out of this system or this process or this mission? And who do we need to make sure that we include in the future? Nonprofits also don't do that. And so if we don't do any of those kind of things, I don't know how we're supposed to expect each other to also document. You mentioned binder, and I love the idea of a binder. And I use this example all the time. So if you've got a kid and they are in, say, 3rd grade, you're not eligible to serve on the PTA for the high school. Like the Parent Teacher Association does not want you.
It's only for your
kid is in the group, right? And so what that does is it formulates this like people leave as a norm. And when you leave the PTA, someone hands you, or when you join the PTA, someone hands you a binder of this vendor sucks. This is our best vendor for the service week. This is why we stopped doing teacher appreciation for a day and now we do it for the month.
Mhm.
So you get handed all of that, and we just don't do any of that in the nonprofit sector. And I started realizing that PTA can also stand for Program Transition and Archive.
Ah,
PTA. So I get to now use the example of PTA binders and also say, like, it is up to each of us to do exactly what you did, Kyle, to document our work. It can be an organizational boon if everyone's doing it, but it
yeah.
also can be really beautiful for you to do it. I will say the caveat there, though, is you also can't tie up any of your ego into whatever it is that you create, because sometimes the incoming person won't look at it. And that's
Mm.
okay. What you've done is created a contribution to the culture of the organization. Whether or not the incoming person uses that data is really up to them. But it's such a gift. And you mentioned it being kind. Like, it's so kind to do that. And we need more people doing it.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And I think I hate when we feel like we have to restart over from scratch or start
Yeah,
from scratch, like we have to reinvent the wheel. And just my own philosophy was that when I leave, I don't want somebody to have to literally go find all new contacts and all of these different things from scratch. Like, let me at least give you a starting place and
yep,
you can do it differently. But here's how I did it. Now make it better for the students that we're
100%.
serving. Um, I think about this work and I think that this could be a lot. I wasn't even, as a former board member over a charter network with over 4,000 students, I'm going to be honest, even here publicly, we never talked about succession
Yeah.
planning. We had unlimited board terms. And I even believe, looking back out now, the board members that we had were not the best for where that school was going.
Mhm.
So where do we even begin? Like, what are the
Yeah.
questions that we should start asking? What are the conversations that we should start having?
Yep.
Let's say I'm an executive board member. Do we start on the board side, on the leadership side? Where do
Yeah.
we even begin in this process?
I think that you have to start with whoever's the willing. So if you've got a board chair or an executive committee who's excited about this and you're listening to this, you're like, we really need to get this started, then you be the one to start. If
That's
you're the
good.
executive director or CEO that's listening and you are thinking, oh my gosh, we really need this, then you be the driving force. You can also be a non-managerial, non-director, executive level person at your at your organization. You can also say, I heard this podcast and I think that we should try
That's
it.
good.
I'm
That's good.
the biggest proponent of, like, use something else in the world as an example of why you should start. There's also a ton of examples of this in the real world. So just to name some at the time of recording that are relevant from the last, say, year, the Tennessee Lady Vols, the women's basketball team, lost all
Yeah,
of their players to the transfer portal. Huge opportunity to talk to your board about, like, what would happen if we lost all of our board members to
that's
the
good.
nonprofit board, transfer portal. The Kiss Cam, the Coldplay concert Kiss Cam example.
Let's talk
Perfect.
about it.
Like, they had their COO in the succession plan. Within 24 hours, he was implanted as the new CEO, and they had communications ready to go.
Wow.
Easy peasy. So there's all sorts of examples. What I will say is that at an executive director or CEO level, it is 100% the board's responsibility to make sure that they have a succession plan in place. Does that mean that the ED can't drive it and say we should have one?
Right.
No, but the board does need to approve that succession plan for the executive director. What I will say is that it will freak people out. So if you're the board chair and you go to the executive director and you say, I think we need a succession plan, your ED is going to freak out. So you have to say, this is org sustainability, this is org continuity, this is whatever it is.
Hey, it's Kyle. Sorry to interrupt your programming, but I got a quick culture check for you. How's your team's energy right now? I mean, literally, right now. Are people feeling inspired? Or are they just showing up? See, here's the truth. Culture doesn't change because we talk about it. It changes because we live it actively every single day. And that's what I help organizations do. Build contagious cultures that people actually want to be a part of. Through keynote talks, interactive trainings, and hands-on consulting, I help leaders transform the way their teams connect, perform, and grow. So if your culture needs a little bit of spark, let's light it up together. Visit theculturelab.org, again, theculturelab.org, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King to learn more about how we can work together. Because remember, your culture is contagious. make it worth catching. Now let's get back to the program.
Same in reverse. If you're the ED and you go to your board chair and say, I've been thinking we need a succession plan, their first thought is going to be, where are you going? And in some cases, you do need to go and they do want you to go. But in a lot of cases, you need to just navigate it as this is what's best for the organization and for the continuity of mission. I think we get so far removed from like, what are we even doing this work for? It's for the community members or for the animals at the Humane Society, whatever the mission is. And at the end of the day, that's what's really the most important. I think the other thing I will say too, Kyle, is going back to kind of the idea of that binder. I had a interim engagement where the executive director died very suddenly, no advance notice. She wasn't ill. And when I sat down at her desk for the first day, there was a drawer full of USBs, no idea what was on them or their importance. There was another drawer full of keys, not labeled, and then a notebook that just had notes from her. We had to start from scratch. We had to start with every one of those USBs. We had to start with the keys, and we can do better. Like we can do better. Obviously, we don't know when our time will end, but every one of us is leaving our roles. And so we can do better than leaving our people a drawer full of USBs and flash drives and keys.
Wow. Once you take that first step, you recognize a lot of the holes that may exist.
Yeah.
What are some of the mistakes though? Like what are some of the pitfalls, mistakes that executive board members or even just leaders in general as they're doing this work may run into, or that you've seen people make it as a part of the process?
Well, so I share stats when I do workshops or retreats with folks that 87% of board members and executive leaders feel that it's very important for a succession plan to be in place, and only 13% of nonprofits across the board have one. So there's a huge gap to fill there. I think some of the mistakes or some of the things that folks need to know is that we are seeing remarkably lower tenures from our executive directors and CEOs. Now, when people are coming into those roles at that leadership level, they're like, I'm here for 3 to 5 years, maybe tops. Where before we were seeing 10, 15, we're celebrating 20 years at organizations. That's not the case anymore. The other thing that's happening is that your directors, your chief level folks that are not in that top, quote, so to speak, level, they don't also want the job. So we used to be able to just say, yep, it's my deputy director, or yes, it's my chief operator. They don't want your job anymore. And so we're really having to navigate what that looks like. For a lot of organizations, a succession plan is now starting with hire a professional interim to come in for 6-9 months, help steady the ship, help people grieve if there's a healing moment that needs to happen, which doesn't happen, honestly, just because of death. It can happen because of an investigation. It can happen when a team feels caught off guard. So knowing that it's not just as easy as filling in your next in command as your successor is one thing to watch out for. The other thing is, like you said, you're going to surface all of these gaps and these competency valleys that you might have. So the succession plan is 2 parts. One is like a 3-page document your board can approve. You're on your way. The second piece, which is more challenging, is starting to dig into what gaps do we have on our team? What knowledge do they need? How are we going to start our knowledge transfer? And sometimes you even need to build in some professional development budget for people to be able to learn. Like, for example, if your program director has not had any insight into your budgeting process, but you've named them as your successor, you're going to need to get them some financial management, professional development if they don't already have it.
It's interesting because you mentioned all of that. And then I think initially that succession planning is just choosing the next person, but it's really like this process of preparing the next person to be able to come into the organization or come into this role and be successful so that it can drive the organization and mission forward. Wow.
Yeah. So the other thing, Kyle, to think about is, for anyone who's listening who already has a sabbatical policy in place, you are 75% of the way to a succession plan, because you likely in your sabbatical policy have figured out who's stepping in while you're out. And you've probably already started the process of, and what do you actually do while you're in my seat? So that's an important thing to name. If you have sabbaticals on your list in the next year to do, you also have a beautiful segue to your board to say, we should also do succession planning. The one thing that I will say, Kyle, is that most times people push back and say, I have no idea how to even broach this with the rest of my team. And I guarantee wherever you're listening from, you have examples of really crappy nonprofit transitions that you can point to and say, like, let's just not be them. And,
Yeah.
and that could start the conversation.
It's like, we'll start there. Let's just not be all of these situations.
Right, right. And to be honest, the let's not be them can be as simple as let's just make sure we have this 3-page document approved by the board. You can also go even farther to say things like, we want to make sure that someone from our team who's stepping into that role to cover, we want to have a stipend. So it might mean that you need to look at your reserves policy if you have one, or your budget to say, are you also planning financially to have this future gap? Because every organization will have it in the future.
So once you have it, it's one of those things that, you have it and you may not need it, but you don't want to need it and not have it. Once you have it, how does that help the organization? Like how much time is allocated towards this on the front end, but then what is the overall return on investment?
Yeah, I think the best return on investment comes from a team that is solidly aware of what happens when the time comes that their leader is gone. We used to say if, right? We used to say if our executive director leaves. Well, the studies, all the data, burnout, it all shows us that it's happening. There's a large number of boomers also who are planning to exit the workforce, not just nonprofits. So you have that plus exhaustion from COVID, exhaustion from 2 Trump presidencies, like all of the things together really start to lean towards when and not if for your organization. The other ROI that I think is really important is we don't take enough time for professional development with our leadership, and leaders meaning anyone that you employ. This is a good spot to be able to say, like, do we need to increase our professional development budget? Do folks have the opportunity to actually learn what is helpful for this organization and for them? Oftentimes professional development is like a conference. It's like, not the Contagions Culture Conference, of course, but most conferences you go to and you're like, okay, it was fun to see everyone, but it's not actually professional development. So it's really about setting aside time to get really, really clear on what your organization will need when the next transition happens. The other thing that I think is potentially beautiful is something where you are building in more regular talking time with your team about their intentions. So exit interviews happen when people leave. I 100% believe, and people disagree with me, and that's fine. Exit interviews in my book are 100% a risk mitigation factor for the organization. It has nothing to do with you as an individual who's leaving.
I agree.
They're not protecting you. They're really hearing, does Kyle know something as he's leaving that's going to harm us on the back end? We need to know. So if that's the truth, then why don't we instead integrate something like stay interviews, or once a year, bring your team together and say, bring your resumes. That project we just finished wrapping up, let's talk how to get it on your resume so that we don't lose the fact that you just did this amazing thing. The other thing that can happen if you do resume reviews, most managers did not hire their employees. Someone else did. They adopted that team. So they've never seen their resume. They have no idea what their skill set is. And so by bringing your team together once a year and just saying, let's talk through, let's update your resumes, let's talk through what you're amazing at. Also ask them, what about their job description have they not been able to get to? Or what were they excited about joining that they're not doing? That can help so many ways when you're thinking about all the gaps that you're identifying as you do succession planning. You can be like, oh my gosh, Jim did that at his last job. We should ask if he can help Chanel. Like, there's so many different ways to just pull your team together, and starting the process can help you start to normalize the conversation.
This is so good. I think about all of my times as a leader, and wow, I feel like I'm being exposed publicly right now because I've done so many exit interviews with employees and with past teachers. And it was really from an HR standpoint to exit and not get a lawsuit or get sued in the future, or really just to see like what we could have done differently. But even if I'm continuing to be transparent, I don't think we ever did anything with the information from the exit interviews. It was like, all right, we're good. Let's keep moving. I love these stay interviews. That is like something I want to implement. I'm definitely going to take that, but I'll give you credit when I use that in a speech or at a conference or something.
They're so beautiful. People get a little nervous. They're like, if we talk to our employees about leaving, wouldn't they think that we're okay if they leave? And I said, well, you should be okay, first of all, if they leave, because they will. And second of all, we're all thinking about what's next, always. It's just human nature. And so normalizing that and just saying, hey, like, we know y'all might be thinking about leaving. We know that there's always going to be something that looks better. While you're here, though, we want to understand what keeps you here. What could we be doing better? No one that I have ever counseled to do a stay interview has had a mass exodus after they started implementing them.
Yeah, that's such a powerful, and I love what you mentioned. Like, most times we're hiring people that are not, we don't even look at their resumes. We're not even looking, we don't even know these people. Most times they were put on our teams, brought into our schools, brought into our organizations. I absolutely love that idea and that tactic to be able to sit down with their resumes and implement or even add the projects that we've had, or even review to see, oh, this person's done this, and then be able to connect across teams or identify ways to be able to leverage their experience. I think these are just amazing ideas. Like, what keeps you in this work? Like, this is so amazing and exciting.
Are you asking me what keeps me in the work?
Yeah.
Or what keeps people in the work?
What keeps you in the work doing this?
Well, I thought so. Both would be great questions, because you're asking your employees basically what keeps them in the work, which is a beautiful reason for stay interviews.
Yep.
What keeps me in the work is just, I've seen so many negative, bad transitions. I also see so many moments where people are not realizing, like, this is deeper than just your current workplace. All of the trauma, like, we all have different reactions to change and transition. Very similar to Clifton Strengths Finders, how folks will take it and then put their teams on grids based on what their top 5 are. I developed an assessment to understand what's your natural reaction to change and transition, and then use that when you're having a big moment. You're going to have people on your team who feel like they're resistant. Really, what they are is, maybe they're the people tenders. Maybe they're making sure that the people are okay. They're not resistant to change. The people who seem like they love change, that might be great for you, but they're also the ones that are going to leave the processes in the dust, and they're not going to write anything down. So you really need to understand too, who makes up your team and how can you best have them help benefit the transition. So all of those things, I think, keep me in the work. Just the possibility that we will see more and more organizations be better about this. I also, just my personal dream is, I really want to see Best Places to Work have a how do we transition people out segment that they get judged on. And honestly too, Kyle, I feel like there's so much accountability that boards and funders have to this conversation. I will get calls from a prospective client, and then we talk about money, and they say, well, we didn't budget for this. Well, no one budgets for this because it's not a sexy thing to talk about or to do. So I'm constantly having calls with funders and foundations to also say, could you please make sure that you are providing access to understand and learn how to do succession planning, so that we don't have orgs that are missing this moment.
No, definitely. What is the cost of not having this?
Well, I mean, I've seen organizations that don't have succession plan, they end up on their feet. I've seen organizations that don't do any kind of knowledge transfer. The incoming executive director is great. They're smart. They'll figure it out. I think that what the cost really turns out to be is more harm and trauma to us individually, because we continue to not prioritize this, even with the most comprehensive succession planning process done. It's still messy. So, like, there's no utopia of a perfect exit where no one's feelings are hurt and no one's sad and everything is done perfectly. But I think that there is real cost when it comes to trauma that we perpetuate. I think that the nonprofit sector can be better than this. And I think that, even if we look at like the Succession theme from the HBO show, I would love for, instead of us thinking about the Succession show, I would love for us to think about, like, oh, that organization really had their shit together and they were ready and they were prepared. It also helps establish a trust bridge that between relationships. So I think that that's probably the thing that's hardest to measure, is instead of consistently starting new relationships over and over, and like you said, them not having to go to find who the right contacts were for platforms and vendors and the programming that you developed. That's huge, especially for mission continuity, to have funders not have a gap in who they should talk to have community partners not have to be reintroduced to someone new. So there's a lot of cost, I think, harder to measure. It's very common to hear that it takes 1.5 times someone's salary to lose them because you're having to go through the search. And so there's
Mhm.
numbers like that. But I think
Yeah.
my cost that I try and measure is more about the people impacted.
I love that how you're really focusing on the people, not just the profit loss.
Yeah.
For leaders listening in right now that they're in the middle of a professional ending, what do you want them to like? What do you want them to hear? What do you want to say to them?
I think the thing for an individual is just know that the feelings that are coming up are not abnormal. Like I said, about halfway through this podcast episode, you're going to likely have things surface from your past that you weren't expecting. You're also going to likely have feelings of all the other bad endings that you've had come up. And I think my encouragement to you is to start with something small, start with the last project that you led, start with the thing you're proudest of, and get some kind of documentation down. You can use Loom as a platform tool to record.
Yeah.
You can jot on a napkin. Like anything is bullet point lists are better than nothing at all. I think just to remember as an individual that we do have power to impact the system through succession planning and knowledge transfer, especially for the person listening who has lived experience or identities that are marginalized. I think it's super easy to let productivity and professionalism and perfectionism get in the way. And I think being able to just focus on the things that you're the proudest of and start there with your knowledge transfer.
This is so good. Oh my God. Like, where can people find out more information? How do they take that assessment that you've built? How do they connect with you online? All of the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So individually, you can go to naomihattaway.com/quiz. That's the individual assessment. If you want to take it for your organization, it's naomihattaway.com/assessment. And on that website, you'll find articles galore. I love to write. You'll find podcast episodes and some other information about how our team works. So yeah.
Naomi, you're amazing. I just
Who are
had to
you?
tell you publicly. This has been such a thoughtful and rich conversation, and it's helped me understand and really unpack a lot of the different things that I wish I would have done differently as a leader. And even has me thinking about even the organization that I run now, the Culture Lab, how I can start maybe documenting some processes and how I can start thinking about if I want to do a sabbatical or if I want to take a month off during the summer to be able to travel with my family,
Yeah.
what that looks like in regards to the business, rather having this unhealthy and toxic environment where I feel like I can never leave, or I feel like I can
100%.
take vacation, or we can only go on the weekend or do something because we're needed on Monday. So I know for a fact that there's going to be continuous conversations that we're going to have so that I could be able to create this organization that I feel proud about as well.
Yeah.
I know you
I'm
have
so glad you said that because literally I am on the 2-week countdown for me being gone for a month. And it is talk about a moment to practice what I preach. And I will be very transparent to say, wow, I have a long ways to go. Like this is what I do all day long with organizations. And when I turned inward to my business, my gosh, so many opportunities for me to be better. So it's also a journey, once you finalize your succession plan, you still have to check in with it. Can't let it collect dust. You need to be proactive with it. So we're all on a journey. And I think that the other thing that I would love for people that are listening, if you're going to take any kind of a step, tell someone else about it too. We have to model the behavior for each other and even say, we're doing it messy. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to start a sabbatical policy or we're going to start our succession plan. Holding yourself accountable to others and to the larger sector is really important.
I love this. If anybody's listening in still, all of our listeners, hold me accountable. Hold me accountable to our sabbatical plan. And it's going to be a month. I'm going to follow you, Naomi. It's going to be a month. We're going to go somewhere for a month. Anybody listening in, one of the questions that we always ask our listeners, what type of culture are you spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Go make yours worth catching. This is another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast with the lovely Naomi Hattaway. And we will see you all next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Contagious Culture Podcast. If this episode challenged or inspired you, hey, take a second to share it with someone who's building culture in their world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself join the movement. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Kyle S. King for more tips, tools, and methodologies to be able to help you create this ecosystem of absolute excellence. Until next time, lead boldly, live intentionally, and remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching.